It's already Saturday morning in Ukraine and Russia, where Vladimir Putin's illegal, murderous, and unprovoked war is now in its 500th day. Many didn't expect the war to last 500 hours, but 500 days later, the strength of the Russian army has been revealed to be an entire myth. The resolve of the Ukrainian people has been revealed to be unfathomably strong, and the iron grip that Vladimir Putin has had on power in Russia since the turn of the century has been weakened considerably. After all, it was just 2 weeks ago tonight that we were watching what appeared to be an attempted coup by the man nicknamed Putin's chef, the founder of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin. And what's clear tonight? Well, we're not sure that coup attempt ever ended. The New York Times is reporting, quote, the mercenary leader Yevgeny V. Prigozhin is in Russia and is a free man despite staging a rebellion against Moscow's military leadership. The leader of Belarus said on Thursday, deepening the mystery of where Mr. Prigozhin and his Wagner group stand and what will become of them. A Pentagon official speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive intelligence said that the Wagner leader had been in Russia for much of the time since the mutiny, but the official said it was not clear whether he had been in Belarus, in part because Mr. Prigozhin apparently uses body doubles to disguise his movements. End quote. If you ask the Kremlin about this, it's much ado about nothing. Quote, the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry S. Peskov, deflected a question about Mr. Prigozhin's whereabouts, saying that the government had neither the ability nor the desire to track his movements, end quote, which is a wildly odd thing to say because Russian intelligence does have the ability to track people's movements. It does it all the time. Next week, Putin gets to look forward to headlines about a NATO summit that will be largely focused on his illegal war. It's the first NATO summit that President Biden will attend since Finland became NATO's 31st member and increased NATO's border with Russia, that red line that you're looking at, by 830 miles, further irritating Vladimir Putin. Just after Putin first became Russia's president, he was asked in March of 2000 by the BBC, quote, is it possible Russia could join NATO? He answered, I don't see why not. I would not rule out such a possibility if and when Russia's views are taken into account as those of an equal partner, end quote. Well, since then, Putin's openness to joining NATO turned to annoyance with NATO and is now just open hostility toward NATO. President Biden faces two big tasks at this NATO summit. One is trying to get Turkey and, to some degree, Hungary to stand down after Turkey blocked Sweden from joining the NATO alliance. And number two is smoothing over relations with NATO members who are bristling after the Pentagon confirmed today that the United States will provide cluster munitions to help Ukraine in its fight against Vladimir Putin's army. BBC News points out more than 100 countries, including the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, have outlawed the use or stockpiling of these weapons due to their indiscriminate effect on civilian populations, end quote. There's a lot to get to here. Joining me now is William Taylor. He's a former ambassador to Ukraine for the United States. He's now the vice president for Europe and Russia at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Bill, thanks for being with us again. Let's start with NATO. President Biden's going to be there. NATO is revitalized. NATO is the reason this war, in large part, continues to go on because it has backed those brave Ukrainian fighters. But Biden has worked really hard to bring NATO together on this, and he's going to land, and there are going to be a whole lot of people who say cluster munitions are really, really bad, and we can't support the U.S. supplying them to Ukraine. Tell me what happens.
So, Ali, you're right. This will be a challenge, but I'm not sure it's an insurmountable challenge. What we've seen so far is allies who have been muted, who have been understanding even about the issue. And the real issue, Ali, as you've just said, is the Ukrainians need our support in order to continue to push the Russians back out of their country. They need our support with weapons and in particular ammunition, and in particular 155 ammunition, which is now very short.
Right.
The Ukrainians are short of this ammunition. It turns out, Ali, we are short of that ammunition as well. So the only way we can provide the Ukrainians the ammunition they need in the near term until we can crank up the production lines is to provide these cluster munitions. Now, if we had a choice, I think we wouldn't do that for the reasons that others have said. But we don't have a choice. We do need the Ukrainians to have that kind of support and that kind of ammunition.
Yeah, we got foundries here in the United States trying to put these 155 munitions out as fast as they can. And there are people raising flags around the world that NATO countries themselves are running short of ammunition. So we have an ammunition problem. And as you and I have discussed, China has not put its thumb on the scale in this war yet, but they can on this front. The one thing China can do is say, we can build munitions. We've got lots of them if you need them. So we have to be prepared for that. Let me ask you about some reporting that we've got at NBC News. I want to read this quote to you. A group of former senior U.S. national security officials has held secret talks with prominent Russians believed to be close to the Kremlin, and in at least one case with the country's top diplomat, with the aim of laying the groundwork for negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Half a dozen people briefed on the discussion said. Now, again, we've couched this because it's unconfirmed information, but people have told us here at NBC that conversations are underway unofficially between the United States and Russia about the end of the war. What do you know about this that you can tell us?
I've heard that these negotiations, they're sometimes called track two, Ali. You've heard these. Mm-hmm. These are when non-government groups talk to non-government groups or former officials talk to former officials. The understanding is always that if you're going to have a conversation about a country, let's just say Ukraine, between the United States and Russia, that you always have Ukraine in the room. And that was not adhered to. So these former U.S. officials were willing to have conversations with Russians, some senior Russians, maybe the foreign minister, about ways to end the war in Ukraine. And without the Ukrainians being there, without them being at the table. This makes no sense. It's unproductive. It's a bad idea.